Hello friends, I'm Maya Grace and welcome to my channel, and I hope you're having a happy Capesmas! If this is the first of my videos you've clicked on, Capesmas is an event that I'm doing for this December where I give back to all of my followers and supporters by giving you all free cape patterns and tutorials. All of the patterns are linked on my Ko-fi, and as per usual, they are highly, chaotically customizable. And speaking about chaotic customization, today's video is going to be on embellishments. There are a number of fun embellishments that you can do to spice up your cape and make it yours. I'm going to walk you through some different ones that you could do. Patch pockets! Now these come standard with the Dino-Gore cape, or at least they're an option that you can do. A little patch pocket on the outside could be a really cute way of storing your phone, for one, but you could also do something cute like a little egg in the case of the Dino-Gore cape, or a cute little heart would be really fun as well. It's beautiful, it's practical, and might weigh down your cape just a little bit if you're going for big dramatic whooshing moments, but other than that, it'd be really fun. Buttons exist, and they're wonderful, and if you're like me and you're a dragon that just hoards all kinds of craft supplies, you probably have a lot of just barely mismatched buttons. Maybe you have one of a very large, fun button that you really like, maybe you have two. But with capes, you can actually put those to use. So to start with, I've taken a button, and I've also got a little spaghetti strap here that I've prepped with some of my self fabric. And what I'm going to do is just measure my button along that string and make sure to make a little loop that is the right size where it can pass over the button, but it's still snug enough that it's not going to just fall right off the button whenever the wearer moves around. Next, I'm going to attach my button to my cape. I'm doing it just right here along the seam where the hood meets the cape. And I'm using lots and lots of sturdy little stitches so that little hands don't rip the button off. Now what I'm doing is I am attaching my little loop to my cape, and I'm just doing a nice little tacking stitch that won't really show through on the other side, and I'm doing a bulk of my stitches on top of my seam allowance so that they're guaranteed not to show. And when you're done, you should have something like this. I have a lot of just one-off shank buttons like these guys. And whenever you're doing buttons for a skirt, you don't typically want a button that's going to show all that much. You might want a more subtle one like this guy. But for these capes, you know, you could use a nice, big, beautiful button. In fact, I even have some that I've been holding onto for years that have little owls on them. Use the owl buttons, guys! And speaking of fancy closures, there actually are a lot of really nice closures on the market that you can buy and sew onto your cape. For example, there's fabric frog closures that you can either buy or make out of self fabric. And there's also a lot of these beautiful like hook and eye loop closures, but they're big and chunky, and I see those at like every craft store in the notions aisle. You could also just simply close your cape with a brooch. If you maybe have a brooch collection that you never have an excuse to use, now's the time to use it. There's also cape pins that exist for just these purposes. And who doesn't love using incredibly niche tools for very simple tasks? I know I do. Now, I didn't really use any of these fancy closures because, well, I was on a very tight budget. I had to make 13 of these for children. And speaking of these being for children, there are adaptations that you can make to make them child safe. And now what I mean by that is by having a snap closure or a Velcro closure, it won't be able to get caught and, you know, potentially strangle a child. Off camera, I constructed this little bow, but if you would like, you can also make a little rectangle strap. And now I'm simply stitching it down with a needle and thread. You can see here that I'm trying to get the back side of the bow so that the stitches don't show through in the front. And once you have your bow securely attached, or your strap as it may be, you're going to want to put the little closure on the other side. Now, I would strongly recommend doing a little sew-on snap closure, but I'm just using this stick-on Velcro due to time constraints. Once you have your snap or your Velcro secured to the other end of your ribbon, you're going to go ahead and attach it on the other side of your cape, in the same general location that you sewed down the other end of the ribbon. You don't want it to be lopsided. And once you're done, it should look a little something like this. This safety feature is really great for kids, especially younger children, because kids are clumsy. But on to more pleasant thoughts. I have truly baffling amounts of this lace trim, and I was able to dye it to match this cape and sew it on, and I'll show you the tutorial for how I did that in just a minute. but I do want to just talk about the beautiful touch that I think this adds, especially as it's framing your face. There's something sort of magical about being able to see the lace just out of the corners of your eyes. It's a really fun experience that I highly recommend. Oh my gosh, I can show you what that's like. Here. It's a bit like this. Isn't that fun? To start with, you're going to treat the edges of your hem the same way that you would standardly by folding them under to create a small hem. But then, instead of simply sewing this down with a straight stitch on your machine, you're going to pin the edges under with a little piece of lace behind it. Be sure to pin from the outside of the fabric so that you're able to sew from the outside of the fabric. This will make your top stitching look much neater. And while top stitching is completely adequate for a project like this, I opted to use a embroidery machine stitch that would kind of help transition the texture of the lace into the solid fabric texture of my cape. But now you're done, and it was actually that easy. And going hand in hand with the lace trim, I want to talk about pretty ribbon ties. I didn't tie this one very good, but you see here it's just ribbon that I've heat sealed and sewed onto the cape, as opposed to doing ties that are made out of the self fabric. This adds just a little bit more texture or possibly a pop of color. And honestly, you could even do a stripe of this ribbon along the hem if you really wanted to. Another way that you could use the same ribbon for a pop of color is to sew it along the straight edges of your hem. That would be along the sides and along the part that goes over the hood, because that line is completely straight. To start with, attach your ribbon to your cape with a straight stitch, with your ribbon and your cape facing right sides together. Next, what you're going to do is fold the ribbon under and pin it from the front so that you have the back side of the ribbon attached in the pin, and then you're going to sew along that line. Now, another really fun way to spice up a cape is with embroidery, and I know what you're thinking. Hand embroidery is an absolute pain, and I agree with you 100%. But the thing is, basically every modern sewing machine comes with at least 100 fancy embroidery stitches that are linear based. I know mine does. And honestly, some of the vintage ones even come with a fun little scallop stitch. There's even one that has a fish stitch, and I've been looking for the machine that has the fish stitch because I will buy a whole machine just for the fish stitch. And I actually really like finding excuses to utilize my embroidery stitches because, I mean, they're kind of fun. And if you use a fun contrasting thread, they're a really great way to add a subtle pop of color to a design. You do these basically the exact same way that you would do any hem, but with a pretty stitch. It's literally that easy. It might be a little bit more time consuming because the needle has to go down like 7 times, whereas with a straight stitch it would only be 1, but I think it's worth it. I actually really wish that I had done more of the embroidery stitches on these capes, but like I said, I was on a huge time crunch, and my husband actually knows how to work my vintage machine, so I had him do a lot of the hems. Now our nieces and nephews are getting capes that we worked on. Anyways, thank you so much for watching this video, especially all the way to the end. If you liked it, be sure to like it so that more awesome people like you can see it. And if you want to go above and beyond in supporting my channel, you already know where my coffee is, and I would love it if you bought me one. Anyways, I'll see y'all next time. Bye, friends! And going hand in hand with lace.